Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another movie review, and as you can tell from the title up there, it is another entry in childhood favorites. I know some of you are probably going to go, that's a weird one to be a childhood favorite, but it is, because I discovered it when I was a kid and I've loved it ever since. It, of course, is the sequel to the 1990 film Tremors, Tremors II, Aftershocks. And of course, this is the the attack pack that I got, I think around 07-ish, because I didn't have any of the films in my collection, so I figured I'll get all four. Because by that point I was first film, classic, second film, good sequel, we're going to review it. Third film, had only seen it a couple times on TV, so I finally got to see an uncut version. And four, I had rented once, hadn't seen it in a while, so I decided to get it. Of course, the TV series, that's another day, another video. Now, Tremors 2, like the first one, I discovered when it was shown on TV, and of course wasn't until I got the DVD I actually saw the uncut version, because for some reason it was only like shown on USA or like Sci-Fi on TV. They didn't show it on any of the big movie channels, and it wasn't until I got older I found out why, and that's because this was a direct-to-video movie. Now I have to say, why it was released direct-to-video, I don't know, because this looks like a film I wouldn't mind seeing in theaters. Granted, it has a small budget, but it uses that budget well, I thought, and it doesn't really have like a TV or direct-to-video feel like the next two films kind of do, even though it's only in certain ways. Here, you could tell that it probably was filmed for theaters or trying to be in between what theatrical or direct-to-DVD, but then they decided to just release it direct-to-DVD. Now, of course, part of it, you can only see a little bit of the fact that it has a small budget, but I'll get to that later. Now, I will have to agree with my buddy Matt that this movie is underrated to a point. The reason I say that is that on IMDb it has a 5.7, which is a very respectable score for a film like this, especially since it's a sequel. And on Rotten Tomatoes it has a 63% with the critics, which some people might find a little surprising. This is the thing I find surprising. It has a 46 with the audience. That's why I say I agree, because I think it should be higher. I think it should at least be like a 59 or a 60 with the audience, because that's way too low. Now if it was one of the next two sequels, I could see why it'd be that low, but this one definitely. Now the film is directed by S.S. Wilson, who is basically the writer of this whole series. He wrote the first one with I believe his friend Brent Maddock, who also helped him write this one. And he also wrote other stuff, like, if I remember correctly, I think he was involved with Short Circuit 1 and 2, among other films. From what I understand, the only other film S.S. Wilson has directed was the fourth film, which, after watching this film, it makes me wonder why, because he's a competent director. It'd be interesting to see him do some other films. Like, if Sci-Fi actually got him to direct films, they'd probably turn out better, and heck, even have him write stuff. Now, original director Ron Underwood was involved with the film, but he only produced it, and that's it. Now, only two actors from the first film return. Fred Ward, once again returning as Earl Bassett, and Michael Gross returning as Burt Gummer. Now, Kevin Bacon from Valentine from the first film doesn't return, although he's mentioned in passing, and I wonder why. I'm guessing probably wanted to do other films, maybe didn't like the idea of a sequel, but it would have been interesting to see Val and Earl dealing with this in Mexico. But for what it is, I don't mind Val's replacement, Grady, played by Christopher Gartin. And I do like how that they do another love interest, only this time for Earl, in the form of a Kate Riley, played by Helen Shaver. I thought they had some good chemistry, just like they had some good romantic chemistry. I mean, it's more subtle, and you know that they'll probably get together at some point in the future after the events of the movie, so it's not like one of those very forced ones. Now, on the subject of chemistry, Fred Ward and Christopher Gartin did have chemistry as Earl and Grady. It's not the same kind of chemistry that Fred had in the first film with Kevin Bacon, where he believed them as longtime buddies who work together. And this one, you can believe that they're strangers who meet, and then slowly, as the film goes on, form kind of a little bit of a friendship. There's like maybe a little bit of antagonism there at first, and because Earl, didn't want to go there originally, but I thought it fit. And then of course Michael Gross being there, same type of character, playing the character of Bert, same way. Maybe not the same way, maybe slightly different, but just as well as he did in the first film. Relationship with Earl, you can believe it's still there. He's getting to know Grady there, and a little bit of antagonism there, but it fits. And of course, even though for a few scenes he's in, Marco Tubert as Senor Ortega, I thought did a good job. And the rest of the principal cast, I thought they did well for the small roles they had to do. Now that I got that out of the way, the plot of the movie is that it takes place 6 years after the events of the first film. Val married Rhonda and they moved away. Earl, whatever money he got from the whole Graboid thing, he bought an ostrich ranch in perfection, and it's basically failing. He only has 2 ostriches. He's trying to get them to mate, and it's not working, which I thought this scene has done great and got some good dialogue. Wildfire, you're either going to walk in out of the corral, or I'm going to shoot you and drag your carcass in there. Which, just on this note, that usually would be the first scene that would be shown when this film was shown on Sci-Fi, and then later when it was on USA. Originally there was another scene. And of course when I found this film, I thought I was imagining a scene, and then of course found this, so I wasn't imagining it. Now of course the scene I'm talking about is an opening scene showing that the Graboids are back in Mexico. Now, then of course they probably, that scene, it's good opening, but you could have cutting it out doesn't really hurt the film, I'll say. Now, about this time, Earl is visited by Grady along with Senor Ortega, and they make him an offer to go take care of a Graboid problem in Mexico, offering $50,000 per Graboid killed. He hesitates at first because, he doesn't want to have to deal with it, and, we talk about the regrets of his one big chance with the whole Graboid situation being blown up. He didn't make any money off a lot of the stuff. What money he did make, he's now wasting, as he puts it, on goddamn Big Bird and his scrawny girlfriend. And of course, Grady finally talks him into it, and they both decide to go down to Mexico. Upon there, they get their equipment, they start killing Graboids, which is interesting the way that they do it, which it's interesting how they introduce it. And it's an idea that you can really believe someone who knows how these creatures hunt would use. Simplistic, but effective. If you're wondering what it is, it's RC cars with dynamite. It works. And of course, since there's a lot of Graboids, they don't really specify how many at first. You can tell there's going to be a lot of explosions. Now eventually they call Bert for help. He shows up and he does the same thing. He helps them. Now eventually they find this one Graboid that is doing some weird activities, running away from them instead of towards them, and they follow him and he's coming up on ground. And of course, since Ortega had offered them double the price, which is $100,000 for a live specimen, they're ecstatic. But that night, as they're waiting for Pedro, one of the workers at the oil place, to come with his truck, they hear the Graboid making strange noise. They go to check it, and it's opened. And of course, now we're introduced to the new threat, the Shriekers, which they're basically like mini versions of the Graboids, only instead of worm-like, they're kind of like bird-like. No, bird's kind of a false thing. Like if I'm gonna say anything like a bird, like a kiwi bird, kind of like little thick, weird legs. No wings or anything like that. They just walk like that. And of course, as we find out, instead of hunting by sound, they hunt by heat, which is interesting. An interesting change. It makes sense. Now, one thing I will say with the advertisement for this movie, we don't see the Shriekers at all in the trailer, except for like one brief shot we see the head of it, which I think is an interesting marketing campaign. That all this is the characters' reaction to them talking, and you're like, oh, what did they turn? And then of course, the caption for the movie, "The worms have turned." Works. Makes sense, especially if you know stuff about worms. And of course, because of the threat that they now run on the ground, just standing still won't do anything. It adds another threat layer. And it makes me wonder on a side note, if they had a little bit more money, what they could have actually done with it. But with the $4 million budget they executed it very well. Now, if there's one problem with the Shriekers, is that the CGI that they use in a few parts of the movie, you can tell it's early CGI, not all there, and that might be a problem that some people have with it. But but mixed together with the practical effects version, it kind of has a little charm to it. And since it was early CGI, it doesn't really bug me that much, especially considering the minuscule budget that the film was allotted. Would have been more interesting if they had done it with like a practical effect and shot it differently, so it could have been more convincing. But it doesn't bother me for what it is. Now, And that's about it. I think that's about all I can comment on the film, really. I mean, it's a very great sequel. Continues the story in a good manner, and it's believable that that a creature would evolve like this, and that it'd be a threat like this in a situation like this. The characters, the two returning ones, they totally act like how they probably would in a situation like this. And it's funny to see Bert at a low point. I am completely out of ammo. Yeah, that gets a chuckle out of me every time, especially his after reaction. That's never happened to me before. Well, you were almost out of ammo in the first movie if you hadn't thought of the elephant gun. And of course, you know, being in similar situations with a different context makes sense, and them having to think on it. And of course, bringing in the whole flip forward thing again was kind of funny. Of course, it also introduced me to MREs, and of course, got a funny joke out of it. This stuff tastes like toilet paper. I'm not gonna spoil the joke, but you can probably guess what it is. And a fun film, and I don't want to spoil everything about the film if you haven't seen it. It is on Netflix, for those of you who have Netflix. If you don't, you could track down the film or something. It also has been YouTubed if you want to spend $3 to watch the film, which I have to say it's worth at least that to watch it. Or if you want to get the film on DVD, you could always get this or the individual DVD, depending on your preference. It's a little under 2 hours. It says 100 minutes here, and let me see what it says on the back of my DVD. It says 1 hour and 40 minutes, so yeah, that's 100 minutes. So it's worth a watch. Another thing, the score was done by Jay Ferguson, which I want to see real quickly what else this guy has done. Just came up 2 different musicians with the name. I don't know which one it is. So the music he did is pretty good. It's probably my favorite music of the 4 films. Nail 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 nail, and it adds a little bit of a Mexican flair. Na 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 na. And it also has a country song in one montage scene, which I thought was interesting, and it kind of fit the location and all that. And that's about it. The only other thing I can mention is the fact that Bert gets a kick-ass gun, which, surprisingly, I don't think we ever see it in any of the other films, although it did have a cameo in Lost World Jurassic Park. Kind of cool. Anti-tank gun. Of course, we see it in the trailer, and using 2 scenes that are in different parts of the movie, and it works for the advertising. Now, as I said before, I think this film should be a little higher rated on those sites, but other than that, I'm actually glad that this does have a fan base, even if it's smaller than what those things report. Anyway, my rating for Tremors 2 Aftershocks is 4.5 out of 5, because I don't really have any big problems with the movie. Like, the only thing, major problem like with the CGI, but that's about it. And it's a film that comes with my high recommendation if you're a fan of sci-fi movies, you're a fan of monster movies, B movies. If you're a fan of Burt Gummer and Fred Ward, definitely. If you're a fan of the first film, definitely. Fan of the series in general, and you haven't seen this one in a while, definitely comes with my recommendation.